Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd, fa'auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brothers and sisters, and welcome to another episode of Muslim Inside with me, rajaziaulhaq. We've been talking about feminism for the last two sessions. Inshallah, today we will talk about the end of feminism. So inshallah, we're going to cover some very important points so that we can finally put this topic to rest. If you recall, in the last two episodes, we talked about the different waves of feminism. We talked about zero-wave feminism, whereby people such as Jeremy Bentham and Montesquieu and others, they talked about how feminism was something that was necessary to colonize and to be able to come in to other lands and come in as saviors and liberators of women and men and so on. And so they needed these type of ideologies in order to fulfill their agendas. Then we talked about the first wave of feminism, which was there during the late 1800s, right up till about 1930s. And in this, we have people like Mary Wollstonecraft, and we have Rebecca Felton, who were some of the key activists at that time, who basically talked about things which were coherent and logical, meaning that they talked about women's right to vote, they talked about women's right to be equal citizens and to be given the right to an education. So these things were completely rational. They had solid ground and foundation for the claims that they were making, but the slight twist in the plot was that they were only asking for these rights for white women, not necessarily for African American women or women who were native to New Zealand or Australia or any other parts of the world. So although the demands were completely coherent and we can understand where they were coming from. The second wave feminist movement, one of the key figures of the entire feminist movement, especially of second wave, is the French lady Simone de Beauvoir, who basically wrote the book The Second Sex, and in that she basically made certain claims that women are different to men, and she said that women are weaker. Practically men can beat women in all sports, and that men are physically more stronger than women and they can beat women in a fight. This is not what I'm saying, this is what she said. And she said that women are more emotional, they cry a lot, they have these sometimes they have these emotional outbreaks. So all of these things she mentioned in her own book The Second Sex, in the chapter of biology. She mentioned all of these things. But then the claim that she made after that was that despite the fact that men and women are different, they should be treated the same. Now the point is that when you make a claim like that, then men and women should be treated the same, or men and women ought to be treated the same. This is a moral judgment. When you say to anything that, this is how things should be, you are making a moral claim. You are making an ethical claim. Like, for example, if I say people should not lie, people should not steal, people should give rights to their parents, these are moral claims. And I'm saying this because the Quran says so, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have an objective morality as Muslims. We have an objective morality because we know that whatever God said, we follow that. So God told us that you should not lie, you should not steal, you should be kind to your parents, you should not fornicate. So we know all of these things. So when Simone de Beauvoir is making this claim that men and women, though they are different, should be treated the same, the first question would be, how can you say that on liberalism? That's a very important question to ask. How on earth can you make that claim based upon liberalism? Because liberalism technically rejects religion, does not rely upon religion for any matters. They say that we are free to make our own decisions how the world should work. So when you make a claim like that, anybody can make a claim. So what makes your claim better than anybody else's claim? So this is a moral judgment, and frankly, you don't have a solid foundation for making, or you don't even provide a mechanism for how we can even substantiate or verify that claim. The second thing we find in this book called The Second Sex by Simone de Beauvoir, and also it's a very important component of the second wave feminist movement, is that there is an attack, a clear-cut attack on motherhood, whereby motherhood has been compared to slavery, oppression, injustice, to the point that the author Betty Friedan, in her book The Feminine Mystique, mentions the housewife or the homemaker, the role of a homemaker woman, as someone who's living in a comfortable concentration camp. So we talked about this yesterday, so I'm not going to go into too much detail of that, but she did mention that this is basically a comfortable concentration camp, that your life as a mother, your life as a wife, it is basically oppression in and of itself. Just the fact that you give birth to children, that is oppression. That is injustice. Just because of the fact that you give birth to children is oppression. So basically what the argument was, that men inherently are bad. Men inherently are bad by just the virtue of them being men. They are going to be oppressors, they're going to make you pregnant, and so you will have to bear children, and so there's oppression straight away. So this is a very ridiculous claim, and there is no mention of that. So the thing is, now oftentimes when people say that, I'm a feminist, or I identify with the feminist ideology, one very important question to ask, this is true for many, many people, by the way. You can do this all day long. When you ask people who identify as feminists, you say that, okay, which books have you read on feminism? The answer is no, I haven't read any books on feminism, but I believe in feminism because it's about women's rights. Well, we too believe in women's rights. But we don't think that the feminist movement in and of itself is equal to women's rights. That's the problem. Because when you read the books of these people, you realize that the arguments that they're making are completely incoherent, illogical, irrational, and they're not backed by anything substantial. It's just ramblings. It's just people's opinions. It's just a rant that they're saying. That, this should be and this should be, without providing any mechanism of why you're saying that. Why should different things be treated the same? And this is what we talked about yesterday. If you missed it, please go back and watch that episode where we talked about this, that why is it that they're making this claim that different things should be treated the same way. Now, what is important to note here is that the feminist movement has re-evaluated the role of women in society without re-evaluating the role of men in society. So everything they're saying is that, women are treated like this is happening to women, this is happening to women, without paying attention to what men are going through. Therefore, you have statements like, women are living in comfortable concentration camps. And I gave the example of this yesterday, whereby I did this analysis that what if we were to switch the roles and women became the bread earners, women became people who were participating in wars and so on, and the man was sitting at home, how would the feminist movement deal with that? So calling this power, that a man has the ability to earn, this is power, and the woman who is at home and the man is spending on her, this is not power. This is what is actually flawed. And there's a very good book out there called The Myth of Male Power that actually highlights some of these statistics of the sacrifices and the difficulties that men have to go through in their workplace, in their environment, and obviously having higher rates of death, higher rates of aggression against them, and so on and so forth. So in this book, it is also mentioned that 99% of the hazardous jobs are taken up by men. 99% of the dangerous, most dangerous and hazardous and life-threatening jobs are being taken up by men. Because when, on the one hand, the feminist movement talks about the wage gap, what about the life expectancy gap? What about the death in the workplace gap? What about the hazardous jobs gap? So all of these gaps are there as well. So why are you picking one aspect and not picking other aspects? What about the fact that men have lesser net income than women do? And in this book, it is mentioned that women have more spending power than men. For example, in the States, the statistics mentioned are that at the end of the day, men have $10,000 per annum and women have $14,000 per annum, because a lot of, if not all of the wealth that the men are actually getting from their workplace is being given to their wives and kids. That's where the bulk of it is being spent, to maintain the house, to give to the wife, to give to the kids. This is what's happening. So marketing companies realize that. That's why a lot of their marketing and advertising in shopping malls is targeted towards women, because they realize that the women are the one who have greater spending power. So when we talked about the laws of inheritance in Islam yesterday, right towards the end of the talk, we mentioned that although man gets the greater share, man gets the greater salary, even if you want to talk about the wage gap, although that's been debunked by feminists themselves. But let's just, for the sake of argument, take that. So if you say that men get more pay, or they have more share in inheritance, they have a dozen different responsibilities where they must spend, where they have to spend on the wife and the kids and so on. right? Even on their mom, even on their sister. So they have to spend on that. On the other hand, the woman has no financial obligations to anyone except herself. So at the end of the day, the man is left with very little net income that he can spend on himself, whereas the woman has far greater net income that she can spend on herself. So there you have another huge gap between men and women. And also we understand that there is not a single nation on the planet throughout history which has ever forced women to go and fight in the battlefield to save the men. But this has happened time and time and time again. Across cultures, across continents, across countries, across empires, men have always been recruited. In the US, it's called the draft, where people are drafted in, even civilians are drafted in. You have this in various parts of the world where men are forced to fight and die and get injured. Why? Because we need to save the women and children. And if the roles were reversed, if this was the case that, women were told to get out of the house and to fight in the battlefield and lay their lives on the line for men, the feminist movement would be the first to say that this is complete injustice. When we look at the men's hazardous occupations, for example, working in coal mines or construction or any of these industries where your life expectancy becomes very low, and there's a constant threat of you dying at any point in time because of falling debris, falling rocks, all of these things. What if the jobs that are mostly taken up by women, for example, the job of a secretary or a receptionist, most of these jobs, I would say 90% are taken up by women. In those occupations, what if we found that constantly buildings were collapsing, constantly there was constantly there was a fear of death that these receptionists and secretaries were facing? Then the feminist movement would be the first to say that how dare you put all of our women in such hazardous occupations whereby every day when they have to go and earn a living, they have to put their lives on the line. But nobody talks like this about the men who are in the mining industry, the men who are in various other hazardous occupations, men who are working in the military, in the Navy, in the Air Force. Nobody talks about that. Men are just expected to die for women. That's just the expectation now. So when I said earlier that the feminist movement has re-evaluated the role of women in society without re-evaluating the role of men in society, that's the real problem here with the feminist movement, that they've basically treated the whole issue with a certain level of unfairness. We do not deny that women are not oppressed in certain parts of the world. We do not deny that certain crimes happen against them. That is absolutely true. But to completely blacklist the entire male population and to start focusing on one issue and rejecting all others, that is unfair. We have comments by the Rockefeller family, one of the largest dynasties in the United States, very extremely wealthy family. When they were interviewed and asked about why they supported the women's lib, why they supported the women's feminist movement in the 1960s and 70s, they mentioned that the reason for that was two reasons. Primarily because we wanted a greater labor force, because previously only the men were working. Now we want the women to also work. So it was purely monetary. The second reason was that we could tax now the whole population, because when you have income tax, now, previously you were only taxing the men, now you can tax the men and the women on their incomes. And most importantly, with the men and women now busy at the workplace, now their children will be raised up by the state. And so that also gives us certain power, that now the state will become an institute, a corporation that will now put, you have to put your kids in daycare, in Montessori, in schools and colleges. And so the parents now are going to be away. So the premise of the entire feminist movement of liberalism was to dismantle the family-centric unit, the family-centric model, and make it into a corporate state-centric model. Because this favors the colonials, this favors liberalism, this favors capitalism, this favors the giant multi-billion-dollar corporations that are trying to rule the world. For them, it is pure business that the family-centric model be disrupted and the state-centric and corporate model be followed. whereby you have giant monopolies ruling the world. So when you now move from the second wave feminist movement to the third wave feminist movement, you have women like Monteith Wittig and Judith Butler, who wrote extensively about the third wave of feminism. And so what became quite a mess with the second wave feminism turns into an absolute disaster with the third wave of feminism. Because now the claim was the mistakes that were made by Simone de Beauvoir, because she said that men and women are different, but they should be treated the same, without providing any mechanism. The third wave feminist movement tried to rectify that by saying that men and women are not different because sex and gender is a social construct. Extremely bizarre thing to say. Sex and gender is a social construct, meaning that your anatomy does not decide if you're a man or woman. Your biology does not decide if you're a man or woman. Your physiology, your psychology does not decide if you're a man or woman, but rather sex and gender is all a social construct. Meaning that society tells you that you are a man and you behave a certain way. And society tells you that you're a woman and you behave a certain way. By the way, there have been extensive experiments, social experiments done on this. Children as young as 2 and 3 years old have been made part of these experiments, whereby, according to one experiment that I can easily recall, is where they had the boys, very young boys, given access to a lot of girl toys like dolls and little puppies and things like that. And the girls, on the other hand, girls who are 2 years old, 3 years old, were given access to what we normally know as boy toys, like toy cars and trucks and guns and swords and action figures, things like that. And when both these groups were observed, because the claim was that sex and gender is a social construct, that we teach our boys to be boys and we teach our girls to be girls, without having any prior knowledge and without having much preconditioning, these children from different parts of the world, when they were given access to these different toys, the boys still took those girl toys and used them as weapons. They were using dolls to hit one another. And they were using dolls in a very aggressive manner, because boys tend to be much more aggressive than girls. And similarly, when girls were given access to guns and so on, they were treating them like babies and kids, even treating action figures like little babies. So the thing is, this is not a social construct. This is biological. We are hardwired, and there's so much research on this that it is absolutely foolish to deny that. It is absolutely foolish to deny science and to deny biology, to deny your chemical composition, your DNA, your hormonal constituents, all of these things. It would be ludicrous to deny all of that. So this is what now the third wave feminist movement said, that because sex and gender is all the same, therefore men and women need to be treated equally because they're all the same anyway. Okay, so this is the claim now. The question is, if you say that sex and gender is a social construct, can you prove it? That's the first question. Can you prove this claim? Because you're making a very bold claim. Can you prove it? The answer is no, you can't. How do you not know that what you're saying is not a social construct? The fact that you're saying that sex and gender is a social construct, how do we know that what you're saying is not a social construct? So you will have no answer to this, by the way. Because again, what are these? These are rants. These are ramblings. They've got nothing to do with science. They've got nothing to do with biology. It's just something that they feel and they just say it and they write books on it. So now the third wave feminist movement is actually going against science. So you have now a clear tension between feminism and science. Because now you're denying basic human biology by saying that no, men and women are exactly the same. Regardless of the fact, however they're born, because sex and gender is all social, so men and women are exactly the same. You're denying all of those things that make a man who a man is. And it's not just human anatomy. There are millions of components that make a man, starting from facial hair, the tone of voice, you have the tone and pitch of voice, you have bone density, you have muscle mass, you have testosterone levels, You have various other psychological implications, emotional implications, all of these things. And women having their own composition. And to deny all of this is absolute madness. So you have now scientific community on one end, and then you have feminists on the other trying to now challenge science, because they want their emotions to be reflected in science. Science, frankly, doesn't care about your emotions. Science is science. Science, frankly, does not care about your feelings and emotions. We have now feminists who are going up against Darwinists, because people who believed in Darwinian evolution, Darwin himself wrote about this. He said that, women are inferior to men based upon, when you look at evolution of mankind and you look at survival of the fittest. He basically compared women to just being a notch above apes. How are you going to deal with that? I mean, it's not something that Muslims believe in. We don't believe in this, but this is what Darwinists would say, that women are inferior to men, and men are the ones who are biologically and physically stronger and dominating and all of those things. And they will give you examples from the animal kingdom. Look at lions versus lionesses. Look at the bear, the male bear versus the female bear, and many, many, many other examples of how in the animal kingdom, what is the role of the male versus the female. The female, you will find, is primarily engaged in rearing the young, reproduction, and all of those acts, which now the feminist movement is trying to completely cut off and say that that's not what women should be. And if a woman were to give birth to children, this is oppression. Whereas, according to Richard Dawkins, who is an atheist and a Darwinist, he would say that our purpose in life is survival and reproduction. As a matter of fact, the greatest thing we can do as human beings is to survive and reproduce. So now you have this conflict between feminists and atheists and Darwinists. Although all of them are coming from the same liberal foundation, but there's huge disagreement now. There is even now an argument between the feminists and a tension between them and the transgender community. Because now with the third wave feminism, the transgender community, you had a person, for example, who would go through gender reassignment surgery, a person who was a biological man who now did surgery to become a woman. But now the third wave feminist movement is telling them that you don't need to become a woman, because guess what? There is no such thing as a man or woman. There is no such thing as male or female. Gender is a social construct. Sex is a social construct. But now this transgender person who basically got surgery done to move from being a man to a woman is saying, but no, I feel like a woman. And they're saying your feelings are invalidated because there is no such thing as a woman. It's all the same. We can have infinite number of genders. You can be whatever you feel like. You can be whatever you feel like. You can identify as anything. So this is where it becomes really crazy, bizarre, ridiculous, anti-science. I don't know what it's become now. The whole LGBT movement is standing on these same foundations. Third wave feminism, that's where it's standing. So now the transgender community is retaliating against the feminist movement because of what the claims are right now. And then you have people in the feminist community who would say that, they talk about objectification of women, that women are objectified. Some of them accept it, some of them call it liberation of women, some of them call it objectification of women. A person who is one of the heads of the porn industry, one of the founders of the porn industry, Hugh Hefner, was an open feminist. And yet he was the same person who mostly exploited women, who made this whole Playboy mansion, and he would have these mistresses, quote unquote girlfriends, living there. Extreme objectification of women. And he said, look, women empowerment is the ability of a woman to remove her clothing and to sleep around with whoever she feels like. This is empowerment. No, this is playing into the hands of sick and perverted men. That's what that is. So there are feminists out there who do say that, yes, women taking their clothes off and being used by men for like sexual reasons is oppression and injustice of women. But on the other hand, you have a whole other group of feminists who are now arguing and saying, no, that is in fact liberation of women. So in a nutshell, what's going on? In a nutshell, second wave feminist movement opened the door to a lot of mess. But now with the third wave feminist movement, and now what is known as the fourth wave or neo-feminist movement, it's become an absolute disaster because there is no solid foundation for anything that anyone is claiming. They're going against science, they're going against common knowledge, they're going against empirical evidences based upon psychological studies and physiological studies, and everybody's making their own claims without providing any ground for why they're even making that claim. So this is now with the third wave feminism, it's become like this. So for example, it is due to these biological differences, like one example that I can quote you, it is because of these biological differences between man and woman that a woman is given preference in custody battles when a matter goes to court. Like when there are husband and wife and they have a separation or divorce and they have children, in most courts around the world, the custody goes to the woman. Why? Because of her biology. Not because of anything else. Because we realize that the woman gave birth to the children. She breastfed them. She has a type of bond with the kids that the father could never have. Why? Because certain biological advantages are being given to the woman. And we as Muslims realize that men and women from that perspective are different. The role of the mother is far greater than the role of the father. This is why the maqam of the woman has been, the respect and the love and the care that is due to her is 3 times greater than the care, love and respect due to the father. Why? Because we understand what the woman has gone through in terms of raising a child. That her hardships are exceptional. So from the Islamic perspective, we understand that men and women are different. They have been given different gender roles. Both of them generally are equal in the sight of Allah. When they pray, they get the same reward. When they fast, they get the same reward. Any other acts they do in order to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they get the same reward. But in society, because society has to function, they are given different job roles. Each according to their own capacity, each according to their own capability. So for example, just to explain this point, if I am good at math, and if I'm good at physics, it would only be natural that I'm put in subjects that are STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, and math. That would only be logical. If you force me to go into working where I need to be very emotional with children or something, I'm going to be a failure at that. I'm really going to struggle with that. On the other hand, if there is a woman who is naturally very good at, for example, any other task, like let's suppose she's very good with medicine. She has a knack for medical science. She's very good in biology and nutritional science and all of those subjects. She's very good at that. Not so much in mathematics and physics, but very good in medicine. And if you try to force her to work in a technical job like engineering or something, obviously it's going to be very difficult for her. Not that she won't be able to do it, but she will have to really struggle hard for it. So even in corporate sectors, we realize that people have to be, it's called appropriate allocation of resources. You allocate resources wherever you find that they will be best suited. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God Almighty, has created men and women with certain characteristics. And then He has laid down the law that the man, based upon his characteristics, has to play this function in society. The woman, based upon her capabilities, has to perform this function in society. We as Muslims recognize the differences between men and women. There should not be injustice between them. They should each work on their own job roles and the important role that both of them are playing in society in order for the betterment of the whole community and the nation and the ummah. This is why both of them have to work together and each of them has to give rights to the other. This is how Islam views it. So with this feminist movement especially, you have the slogans coming out like my body, my choice, or in the Urdu language they said mera jism, meri marzi. These slogans, you have to understand, are purely liberal slogans. It's got nothing to do with women's rights. Purely a liberal slogan that do as you wish. As a matter of fact, this is a satanic slogan. The Church of Satan has this as their kalima, as their key slogan, that do what thou wilt. You have Anton LaVey, who is the founder of the Church of Satan. He has been propagating this for years. You have many others now who are Satanists, who will basically propagate the same slogan that do as thou wilt. Do whatever you feel like doing. So Islam doesn't say this for men or women, that do whatever you wish. We say, no, do what Allah commanded you. Do what God commanded you. So it's not that the man can do whatever he wants and the woman can do whatever she wants. No. We have to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala no matter where we are, no matter what job we've been given, no matter what task it is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made us different. He's made each one of us unique. And so at the end of the day, we as Muslims realize our worldview says that we have to go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah will judge us based upon how we lived in this life. Whether we were living based upon principles of justice and fairness, whether we did the task that was required of us. I mean, if a man gets up one day and says, I don't want to provide for the woman. Why should I? Why should I have to pay the check every single time we go out to eat? Why should I have to pay the bills for my kids at school? Why? Why should I have to go and fight wars? Why should I have to work in dangerous occupations? Why should I have to do that? And what if like a men's lib movement starts? A movement that talks about men's rights. But the thing is that we don't want that, because we as men understand that whatever job or description has been given to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have to fulfill that. We say, Samiyana wa ta'ana, we hear and we obey. Likewise, the women, the children, everyone. So Islam ensures rights for all people, all things. Islam talks about rights for women. Islam talks about rights for men, rights for children, rights for animals, even rights for plants. That you should not even cut a tree without just cause. So this is what the Islamic worldview is. So my dear brothers and sisters, in summary, when we're talking about the end of feminism, what we're saying is that the feminist movement is an offshoot, is a child of the liberal movement with the agenda to disrupt and destroy the family-centric model and to make it a state-centric and corporate model, whereby the women are asked to change their roles in society. The role of women is being re-evaluated, reprocessed without looking at the sacrifices made by men. And I've already referenced tons of literature that you can refer to, and inshallah we'll try to put other links in the description as well. So we make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enables us to follow the deen of Islam completely in its entirety, to be able to follow the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and to do justice no matter where we are. If we are men, we do justice with our wives, our mothers, our daughters. And if we are women, we also do justice with all of the people who we come into contact with. I make this dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives us for our mistakes and our transgressions, and may He enable us to do deeds of righteousness, and may He join all of us in paradise, inshallah. I'll see you guys tomorrow, same time, same channel. Don't forget to leave your comments and your feedback in the comment section below. I will do my best to answer them tomorrow, inshallah. I'll see you then. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.